Good evening, everyone. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Simsbury Water Pollution Control Authority. Today is Thursday, June 11th, 2020 at 7 p.m. We have in attendance Tom Hickey, Lucian Dragolsky, Jacques Brigna, Jay Sheehan, myself, Paul Gilmore. We have Allison Sturgeon, our clerk, Thomas Roy, our Director of Public Works, and Tony Piazza, our Superintendent. So without further ado, we will launch into the agenda. Item number one is a safety brief. I trust everyone is doing appropriate social distancing, staying safe, and healthy during this problematic time. Number two, discussion FCC policy regarding condominiums and townhouses. My understanding was that Jay took on as a pet project looking into this a little bit in terms of the flow volume to juxtapose the two and see what kind of similarities and differentials there were. So Jay, you have the floor. Jay, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Jay Sheehan with the commission. So wanted to look at this whole issue in terms of when we looked at this. So the policy was set in 2013. I looked at the land use regs, which were updated, the zoning regs in 2015. So Tony, you were going to check with the town and the department to see if they came up with any differences between then and now in terms of townhome definition and condominium definition. I don't know if you had a chance to do that, Tony.
I did send an email to Mike Liddon, the Director of Planning. He did not get back to me today, so I did not get any information on that.
Okay, so from the land use as it is today, again, this is in 2013 when we sent the FCC, we consider a townhouse, as they call it, a townhouse residential development at up to 10 units per acre of site area. So that's how they define it. So it's 10 units per acre of site. So they have a different land use for that. Obviously, single family is up to 6 units per acre of site. So that's a different, use on the site. And then they didn't really define condominiums in the regs. So that's just how they define it. So I just want to make sure that we were going back to the basics. In terms of water usage, the only guidance that we get is from the Department of Public Health, Connecticut DPH. And there's a public health code that talks about residential buildings, and the entirety of that is design flows for residential buildings shall be based on the number of bedrooms. The design flow per bedroom is 150 gallons per day, except for bedrooms beyond 3 in a single family home that would have a design flow of 75 gallons per day for each additional bedroom. So a 3-bedroom is 150 gallons times 3. So that's 450. A 4-bedroom would be 450 plus another 75. They do not distinguish between condominiums, townhouses, townhomes, any distinction. It's just residential. So that's the definition by the state. Now, that said, we can do what we want. If we do, we have to go back to a public meeting to change our current FCC. We all know that. So I did research on what other states do and what other areas do of some other cities, other things. And essentially looking at even all 50 states, it is a myriad of different approaches. The quantity per bedroom, is all over the place. Maine uses 90 gallons per day per bedroom, and with a minimum flow of 180, and it just goes all over the place. The only place that I really found that made a distinction between condos, townhomes, and just regular residential what they did was they said that in their estimation, they have single family residents. They were saying, depending on they did it by square footage. I'm just giving you reference points. They had it for 3,000 square feet, over 3,000, over 5,000. They had gallons per day for that single family. Then they had a different one for apartments, which was roughly about half of the flow. And apartments and condos were the same. And then lastly, they had townhouses, which were about 3/4 of the flow. So we can do whatever we want. There is precedent to do nothing. There's precedent, from elsewhere to change it. But with the amount of flow that we have, is a bedroom in a townhome going to use less water than a bedroom in a single family home? I don't think. I mean, maybe, but we don't have any data to say that that's true. Does that kind of frame the conversation for you all?
Yes, that's a very fine report, Shay. I appreciate the good work that you did for it.
What I did was I went back and looked at the meeting minutes from the subcommittee, and also of the meeting minutes of the approval of the revisions to the FCC policy. Yeah. And back in August 31st of 2012, which is the final subcommittee meeting, where the recommendation was made forward to the board. What was recommended was the policy as it is, with the prorated for apartments and condominiums. And then the last sentence of that was put in there, says that a townhome would be treated as a single family dwelling. In the meeting minutes for the board, the full board, there was discussion regarding what's considered a condominium and what's considered an apartment, what's considered a townhome. And it was recommended that definitions be put on each of those. The only definitions that got put into the policy were for a condominium and an apartment. There was nothing for a definition for a townhome. So I guess the question is that I would have would be, is a townhome considered a single family or a single dwelling unit like a home, or is it considered part of more like an apartment? Because that would make the difference. I guess that would be the discussion for the board members that were there, of what was your thought process on the difference between a townhome and a condominium at that point in time.
Okay, thank you, Tony. That's very helpful. So it sounds to me, to kind of recap, that the subcommittee considered a townhome to be effectively the same type of dwelling as a single family home, freestanding home.
Correct.
In terms of water usage. So that shows that there was, clear consideration of how a townhome should be treated at a time when we were considering providing some sort of a stepped and somewhat reduced charge for condominiums, which we ultimately wound up doing for condominiums based upon number of bedrooms and square footage. Just given all that both of you have found and researched, and just kind of having an understanding of a townhome as, being really more of a substantial type of a housing investment than a condominium, with, I guess one would say the benefits of not having all the burdens of like caring for a lawn and all that kind of stuff. I think honestly that there aren't grounds or sufficient evidence presently to warrant changing the policy, or to even look further into whether or not it would be efficacious to change the policy. I think it's sound as it is and should remain the same, and that a townhome should remain treated as should be treated as a single family home. But that's my thought.
Paul, if I could just add, I think what Tony pulled up in the minutes from that last FCC subcommittee meeting very much says that this was a deliberate decision that you and other members of that committee made, where it says, and I'm reading, the term condominium was discussed. Mr. Dafada from Powder Forest Homes stated that there are townhomes structured as condominiums where an association owns the outside of the buildings. The definition of condominium needs to be very clear. Mr. Gilmore stated that his intent in using the term condominium is that it is a dwelling unit contained within a building of other dwelling units. It is not a freestanding structure or a PUD.
Okay.
I think you guys did a really nice job of thinking this through many, many years ago. And I think, I don't know who was the clerk at the time, but they did a nice job of capturing it.
Yep. So that's my recall as well, is that, you know, we could make a policy, we could change something, but I don't think we have an impetus to do it. I think we thought through it at the time. If someone came to us and presented data that was to change our opinion, then we could consider that. But we don't really have any data that would say we have it wrong.
Just to go along with that, Jay, as most of you know, recently there was townhomes that were put on the Ridge property, which is 20 Hot Meadow Street. I think was it 20? No, not 200.
Right on that. Right on
200, one of those Hot Meadow Street developments. So we will have water data from those townhomes next year. We don't have anything this year for those. And we do have data from 20 Hot Meadow Street for a year's worth of water, which is, I don't know what those are classified as, if those are classified as townhomes, or if they're classified as apartments. I'd have to look to see what those were classified as. I don't know what those are classified as.
All right. Any other thoughts? Any other members want to weigh in on this as to whether we think we stand pat or would like to explore further, how we assess townhouses?
I agree with everything that's been said.
Okay. Lucian?
No, I don't know. It's a bedroom is a bedroom, right? So why would I, that live in a condominium, use less water than you that you live in a home? I mean, we go to the bathroom, we have the same, we take a shower. Unless they do something, or you do something with the plumbing fixtures, and because if you have an older home, you use more water. If you have a newer home, you use less water. But as far as bedrooms, I mean, I think we should treat everything the same, in my opinion. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why would the condominium use less water than townhome or townhouse? I think water usage should be the same, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Just Lucian, I think what the thought was back when this was done, and Paul and Jay, you guys were there, so you guys could probably correct me if I'm wrong, that there wasn't any condos being built in Simsbury, and there hadn't been any condos built in Simsbury probably since before the plant was upgraded in 2007. The thought was to treat condominiums, as they say, as more like apartments, because they're going to be smaller in size. So that's why I think it went more to that route for the condominium part of the SEC policy. And that's why I think they said townhomes are more like individual dwelling units. So they're going to be bigger. So they're going to be rated as a regular EDU or FCC.
I don't know. In my opinion, the size of the home It doesn't matter. I mean, you can have a 10,000 square feet house with 2 bedrooms, and you can have a 3,000 square foot house with 4 bedrooms. So what do you do then? I mean, a bedroom is a bedroom, regardless the size of the house, in my opinion.
The
If
bedroom.
you go by the bedrooms, in my opinion. I mean, if you can go by the size, the square footage or the size of the house or the dwelling, and then we can do something different. And then I will agree that it's, but if it's.
I think we're looking at two separate things here when we're talking about flow. I agree with you, because the flow is based on, if we're looking at our capacity, we're looking at flow. Where this part is just actually looking at the connection charge part.
Okay.
Whether it should be connected as an apartment or that's
Well,
what
Tony, I don't think you necessarily bifurcate those, because you've got 3 ways that the utility's paid, right? So you have a facility connection charge, which is buying into the capacity. So you're buying in at a lower capacity as a condo because you're using less water. You're buying less of the flow to the plant. The utility sewer rate is what people pay to do operation and maintenance. So that's your annual budget. And then the third revenue is the betterment charge, which is really for having sewer available and making them. And so that's paying down our debt. We usually have betterment towards the debt service. We usually have the facility connection charge towards the capacity, and that that's how the budget's balanced. So I think capacity at the plant, FCC, and flows do relate. But I could, tell me I'm wrong. I'm just that's how I do it in my head.
Oh, they all do relate. I don't disagree with that.
And I think it all comes down to bedrooms is just a metric. Really, it's in many ways to figure out how many people are living in the home, because that's really what's generating the flow as a general. So I understand Lucian's point completely, which is if you have, how many times do we have a 3 or 4 bedroom house where it's only 2 people or 3 people living there versus a condo, which even though it's a smaller square footage, it's more likely to have at least 1, if not 2 people living there.
So the problem is, though, that a facility connection charge is issued and assessed once and one time only. And it's based upon really the capacity, right, of the use of the property, right? And so that's a function of, a number of things, right, in terms of the dynamics. I mean, I'm sure that it could be figured out or estimated, depending upon the size of the home and how many bedrooms, what's the average, occupancy of a home of a certain size, but I mean, that could just, could depend on other demographics of a particular town. And I guess there are all sorts of ways to try and figure out on average, based upon a number of factors, who is, how many people are actually using the bedrooms of a house of a certain size in our town. But, that's the perfect world. And, we live in a world where there are, approximations and estimations and, where we, make certain decisions, in good faith and, trying to be reasonable and pragmatic, but with imperfect information. And given all of that, there has to be a reason to change, and so if people want to try and study and get more granular and finite about this, to see really what is the appropriate or the closest charge that would be for the actual practical likely use of a structure over its useful life, knowing that dynamics can change, I don't know. We got to think about the cost benefit analysis of trying to figure all that stuff out, and whether or not are we being faithful to our mission, keeping things the way they are based upon what we know.
And if I'll share my screen for a moment, because I have the policy right here. So I think it'd be worth us all just really taking a look at it. You can see that it's very clear. There's 3 conditions right now in the current policy. And this is from 2012, actually, November 2012. An apartment or condo that's less than 1,200 square feet, we have a certain fee. An apartment or condo that's greater than 2,000 square feet, we did 70%, 80%, and then 100% is any residential dwelling unit that does not satisfy either of these 2 criteria. So what we'd be doing by making a change, which you're right, Paul, I mean, are we serving properly or not? But we would be adding a 4th condition. So probably 3, and then this would become 4, which is a townhome, which would for some reason not be, we're saying 80% of the flow for less than a 2,000 foot condo, and 1,200 square feet, 70%, would have some like 90% for a townhome, but I don't have a basis for it. Like that's what I'm struggling with. Like, where is that's 70%? Well, yeah, it's probably 70% of a size of a, 1,200 square feet. 80%, 2,000 square, that's where I get stuck. So I think the policy's strong and clear. I don't think it's ambiguous.
Okay. So don't you want to have I appreciate that. That's a nice illustration there. Do we want to have a show of hands as to whether or not we want to study it further? Should we put it to a vote? Whether it should be studied further?
Sure.
Okay. All in favor of studying the issue further, raise your hand and say aye. Seeing and hearing none, the policy for the time being, and unless otherwise there's given good reason for further exploration and consideration, will remain the same. Item number 3, status report on sewer extension projects, etc.
I think the only one worthy of reporting on, and I think we touched on it last month, is Woodland Street continues to be in design. We have DPC, who's our consulting engineer, working with our town staff on getting us the next phase of the design. Do you have anything extra on that, Tony?
The survey is on the drafters board right now. They should hopefully tomorrow we may get it, or early next week we should get the survey completed. That will be able to forward on and actually start getting into the design really heavy. The only other one that's on the list still is the Meadowwood property or project, which the town is looking to purchase that as open space. So that project may be going away completely if the town purchases that land.
Okay. Anyone have any questions about the status report? Okay. Thank you. Seeing none, let's move on to item number 4, the treatment facility report.
Most of the projects that we're using outside vendors for are on hold right now. So the PLC upgrade is on hold. AECom is still working on the water pollution control plan and the facilities plan for us. Sanitary sewer lining, we actually spent just over 3.5 weeks lining the sewers. We got just under 13,000 linear feet of pipe done at a cost of $508,000. We also did a video of the Tunxus force main to make sure we can slip line that next year, which the video actually came out well, so we'll be able to put that in our budget for next year for lining the force main and Terrafill. The plant water system, we finally got the rest of the parts in. this week. So we're actually, once Aquarium gives us a backflow preventer, we're going to start that project hopefully next Thursday or Friday, and replace that system ourselves.
All right. Any questions about the treatment facility report? Seeing none. Thank you, Tony. Let's move on to item number 5, correspondence.
The only thing is a FCC letter for the new McLean home building that they're putting in. They're actually taking out 16 cottages and replacing it with a larger overall facility with a parking garage. And the new FCC is going to be just over $160,000 for that building.
I see that there was a credit given for the 16 cottages. How does that credit work, and what's our policy for credit?
What we do is if a building is demolished and they've already paid into the system for those buildings, we credit those buildings for that, for what they already paid in, if the buildings are on the property and were demolished.
And is that based upon, do we figure out what they paid way back when, versus and what the use could have been made of those buildings versus what the building would be now? Or do we bring forward to what it would cost to have the structures now that are being demolished versus the differential between the new proposed building? You know what I'm saying? Do they get some sort of?
It's a combination of a lot of those, but basically it's what it is now. What our policy states now is the credit they get now. But we look at all factors. For what most of these buildings were put in with the new FCC policy that were being demolished. There was 2, I think, that were part of the older system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions about the correspondence? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the May meeting minutes for possible approval. And is there anyone who has not had an opportunity to review them before we have assembled virtually here this evening? All right, seeing none, does anyone have any questions, concerns, or proposed edits to the regular meeting minutes for the May 14th meeting?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the May meeting minutes.
So
Second.
moved. Seconded. Anyone want to discuss the motion? Seeing no one vying for discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. That leads us to item number 7, which is for adjourning.
Real quick before we adjourn, one open item, if it's possible to add to the agenda. Do I need to make a motion to add a discussion?
Sure, you can move to amend.
Okay, move to amend the agenda to just add one item for discussion before the adjournment.
And any other business that someone wants to bring up.
Yes.
All right. Anyone want to second that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Proceed.
So just real easy, quick one. The industrial general permit that is going to be published soon, and Tony knows about this intimately. It's going to require some new things of our utility and Tony and the crew. So if the public hearing is being set, there's a pre-hearing for the public hearing. And the way it works is there'll be this pre-hearing's coming up in the I think it's next week. Then they'll set a public hearing date. And then that usually is about 30 days. And then you have to voice your pleasure or displeasure with this new requirement. Once that's done, it's going to be in DP's hands to roll through the legislative process. So we need to, if we want to comment on it, we have to do that soon. What MDC is taking a leadership role on this. What in a nutshell is happening is the state DEP used to run all the industrial wastewater permits. So for everyone in town, and I know we've talked about, so if this is redundant, that's a good thing because then you listened. But all the industry in town has to have an industrial discharge permit. That process was all between them and the state. And frankly, they didn't do a great job of always including the local town. So Tony may not have a record of all those industrial users. Most towns don't. The state wants to push that back on the municipality. So we don't have a ton of industry in town, but we have some. And we don't know all that we have because Tony's never been copied on all the correspondence. So there will be some additional costs for Tony and his crew to look at these permits, issue these permits, require monitoring of those. See, it used to be between the state and the user. Now it's going to be between the town and the user. So if they're, for instance, high BOD strength waste, we make them test and send us the test. Now, WPCA staff will have to look at those tests on a routine basis, make sure they're not deviating from their permit, which we made with them now. And the cost of the testing will be on the industrial user, but the cost of compliance and making sure they do it is on us. So I just want to point that out. I don't, Tony, if you have any more to add to that.
Yeah, with that, and that was one of the things I actually brought up with the state meetings was if they roll this permit out in October and it puts the onus on the towns have no recourse for 6 months, 7 months to come up with any fee structure because we vote on our fee structures in May, and all towns are the same. They vote on their fee structures in May. So we'd have 7 months of permits that are coming in because the state is saying that the permits are due to the towns within 90 days of the issuance of the general permit. So we'd have to look at every industrial permit at no cost to them, because there's no fee structure set up legally, unless we have a special hearing on it.
So there's two things we can do to make sure these comments go in. I mean, we could write letters, of course, and once we hear more and those are considered, we can file as intervener status if we wanted to, or we could just be present at the hearing and make sure that there's commentary. And I would personally recommend the latter, that Tony and I potentially go, or whoever wants to go, should be there and represent Simsbury's interests to the state, go on the record. Usually you write the letter and go and present the letter and they read into record. But I think we probably should, that what we're asking the state for is clear records of who in town are industrial users and ample time to adjust our fee structure. I don't think it's a big ask. It's not unreasonable, but they want this gone. They're so done with this conversation. They want it off their plates. This is part of saving money for the state, so they won't have industrial inspectors anymore.
The other part of this that comes into play is Avon and Granby, where those towns have to give us the information that they're collecting, but
good point.
They can collect all the fees. We don't get the fees. They would collect any fees that come out, but we're still responsible for that permit. The enforcement of that permit for those towns.
And more importantly, with the industrial waste, if there was the high BOD content or other non-uniform waste streams, we still have that responsibility to review it. And if anything, as the plant operator, we probably have more skin in the game, so to speak, than either Avon or Granby, whose responsibility is only to convey the flow.
Definitely. So I don't know if we need a motion or if, we can authorize Tony to follow up on this and, at the hearing and participate.
Yeah, I don't think we need to necessarily appoint a subcommittee or anything like that. But if you and Tony wanted to do that, that'd be great. If you want to craft a letter, Jay, to send, since you seem like really on top of the issue, and it's part of, that's something that you should be able to send out if it's before the summer recess. I don't know if that's something that if we need to authorize you to issue the correspondence. Tony sends out correspondence all the time.
Yeah.
Without us, giving him a yay or
I
nay.
think it might be better if it comes from me.
Okay.
That way, I'll work with Jay on it, and that way, Jay, it keeps, because I know you're on both the CWPAA and the other one there, so it'll keep you separate from.
That's a good point.
From that.
Do you have any idea what the magnitude of the cost would be to do the assessment for business?
Right now, and Jay, you may know this better than I think the industrial permits have to pay, I think, either a $500 or a $750 permit fee to the state, I think is what they get right now. And the state basically said, yeah, we're done. We're not doing it anymore. So that's what they were getting to review these general permits at that point in time.
And when was that set? Do you know when those fees were set?
I do not.
Oh, a long time ago.
It was a long time ago,
They
yeah.
haven't adjusted those fees in a long time. And I would say, I mean, Tony, what would you estimate in terms of manpower? Is it a quarter person's time, or is it?
Without not knowing how many industrial users there are, I can't even guess.
Yeah.
If you say there's in industrial users by this permit, car washes are industrial users, breweries, things that you wouldn't think of that are not industrial, but they're considered industrial users. It's basically any industry that's less than 25,000 gallons per day is covered under this permit.
So is it possible that the time constraints under which we might be placed, we would have to actually hire someone to perform those duties?
At this time, I'm going to say no. I think luckily, I think we have between the way we shifted stuff around just recently, there's time between myself, Mike LeClaire, and our inspector that can get it done.
And do we have an estimate of what an hour of unit of work for the various people would be?
I do not, because we don't know the extent of how many permits we're going to have to issue.
Is this something that's reviewed on a monthly basis, or how frequently do you guys have to go through that?
It's anytime. Well, the initial surge is going to be the big one,
right?
And then it's an annual review of the permits. And again, I haven't gone through the whole thing yet. This general permit is good for 5 years, but anytime the user changes their flow, they have to resubmit a permit. Or they have to re-notify us.
And Tom, I would contend that it's conceivable that we're going to be getting monthly samples, monthly results. So there's some level of administration that has to happen there, whether we wait and do that all in one big push in a year, or we do it quarterly, or Tony's got to figure that out, but we don't even know yet what that looks like.
And Tony, to clarify something you brought up regarding the relationship we have set up with both Granby and Avon, you're saying they would collect the fees from their users, but that money wouldn't ultimately get funneled up to us, even though we're doing the reviewing? How does that work?
That is correct. The way it is they are supposed to notify us, but we have no rights to collect fees from other towns.
Well, but who does they don't have to review themselves?
They would have to review themselves, but we would also, as them discharging to us, I would want to review that information anyway to make sure,
If there's going to be some heavy load of, from a bakery, a heavy load of yeast or something, again, we're going to be more interested in not only how much, but how is it going to be distributed? Is it all coming in one big hit at noontime, or, and these are things where, again, we have a different role in the process than the towns that are contributing. The other piece of this too is with our local businesses is, again, there's going to be a level of coordination with them, and from time to time there's going to be some issues if there's some waste that maybe comes through that's different than what was permitted, and again, there's always the everyday reviewing the permit is pretty uniform, but from time to time we're going to have somebody really have an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So more to come. We'll let you know.
This is happening as soon as September, October, you said?
The initial public hearing, or the pre-hearing, is on the 18th of this month. So next Friday.
So then it might be 30 days for the hearing, and then it might be enacted 30 days after the hearing. You know,
Right.
it might be
So in-
quick.
Okay, so we need to do some sort of a workup of, doing, some pricing to figure it out and put it in place. Because if we have to start rendering services without a fee structure, it could be hard to later assess a fee. Whereas I think that we could, in anticipation of having this responsibility, I think we could put in place a fee structure, so long as it's rationally based in terms of reasonable estimates of time, talent, and resources for doing the work.
And we should have time to come up with that. This permit is scheduled to go into, if everything goes according to plan for the state, the permit is scheduled to go into effect in October of this year.
Okay.
So we could come back, and it is hard to guess what industries will have because it's flow based, but maybe Tony, the planning or zoning would have some record of, we could look through the different land uses that are existing, and maybe we'll be able to tell roughly if it's 50 or if it's 500,
Yeah, I think we have, within the town, we have enough records to get a ballpark.
Yep.
What we're talking about. I think that the next part, though, is just getting an understanding of how much effort we're going to put into reviewing these when they come in.
Okay. All right. Good discussion. Thanks for bringing it up, Jay.
Thanks for.
Do we have any other business that anyone wants to bring up and discuss? No. Seeing none, and as we are about to recess for the summer, I want to wish you all a happy and healthy summer. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. See you all in September, unless we have some sort of a special meeting need.
Yeah.
Be well.
Thanks.
All right. Happy
Have
summer.
a great summer.
Happy summer.
Take care.